So, the future of democracy, my friends, feels like a light subject right now, I think. The subtitle of my book, as Christabel says, is Why the Key to Fixing Everything is All of Us. And I've come to understand the future of democracy that I'm working for. I'm a visiting fellow at Harvard University as part of the Reimagining Democracy program there. And I've come to understand the kind of democracy that I'm working for as one that is deeply inspired by nature, but also as one that is possible, is already emerging, and fundamentally does need all of us, all of you in this room, to do something. I'm going to start my talk today with a story of possibility, because I think right now it can be easy to look out of the world and think that there isn't much possibility. I'm going to take you back to November 2019 and to Dallas, Texas. This was a time of already really very deep polarization in the US. A day after the process that I'm about to tell you about, Nancy Pelosi launched the first impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump. But what I'm going to tell you about is a 4-day process that I think holds so much hope for the future of our democracy. It was called America in One Room. 530 American citizens, randomly selected to be representative of the national population on all key demographics, were brought together into that space. It's a little representation of those people. 530 representative of the national population. What that means in practice is that 30 of those people explicitly self-identified as extremely conservative. 30 of those people explicitly self-identified as extremely liberal. The rumors go that the whole process nearly didn't go ahead because the insurance company tried to charge too much because they thought people were going to kill each other. In the event, what they came together to do was to deliberate, discuss in small groups and then larger groups a whole load of the key issues facing the country. And what happened was two things. Firstly, they found a whole load of consensus on some of the most polarizing and difficult issues of our times. This is a chart showing how those self-identifying as Republican voters shifted their views on immigration. 79% of those identifying as Republican before the discussions supported forcing undocumented migrants to return to home countries before applying to live and work in the US. After 4 days of discussions, alongside 25 other topics, that had dropped by half. What this shows and starts to hint is that if you bring people together in the right conditions, if you give them the opportunity to talk to one another, to meet one another, they can deliberate and they can come to very different places. But the most profound finding was not about the subject matter, it was about how these people shifted their view of one another. There are two kinds of polarization in the literature. One is issue polarization, where I disagree with Christabel about something. The other is affective polarization, where therefore Christabel is evil. Affective polarization in the 530 people went through the floor, to the extent that in a follow-up study done the next year, they found that over half of the 530 people had taken it on themselves to be active propagators of bridging values, of connecting across difference in their communities. This process not only found a way in 4 days to show that we can find common space, we can find different views of one another, but that it can seed an immune system for the future of our democracy in us. This story I want to take because that one process, America in One Room, 530 people over 4 days, is one example of a whole different way of doing democracy that is now starting to spread across the world. And if we can understand that and lean into it and deploy it more, and actually take the principles of it into our day-to-day work, then I do believe that we can shift this paradigm completely, almost overnight. And I think it's happening. So that's my story of possibility. Now what I want to offer you as most fundamental from my work is a way of seeing the moment in time we're living in, a way of seeing this political moment. I look at everything through the lens of 3 stories. Stories of self and society, I call them. The easiest way to introduce this framework is as a historical shift. My argument is that at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, we lived in what I call the subject story. In the subject story, the right thing to do is keep your head down, do as you're told, get what you're given, on the basis that a God-given few who know best run society and they will lead us to the best outcomes for society as a whole. In the subject story, we're dependent. We have stuff done to us. We obey and receive, and organizations and leaders command us. That story fell apart end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, industrial revolution, rise of the middle class. You just couldn't sustain the idea of a God-given few who knew best anymore. Out of the 2 world wars, and it took 2 world wars for this shift to happen, we more or less deliberately, more or less consciously constructed a different society out of what I call the consumer story. In the consumer story, the right thing to do is no longer to keep your head down and do as you're told. The right thing to do is to pursue self-interest. The right thing to do. On the basis is that if everyone pursues their self-interest, that will add up to the collective interest. That is the way to achieve the best outcomes for society. In the consumer story, we're independent. We have stuff done for us. We demand and choose, and organizations and leaders serve us. What I believe is happening in this moment in time is that the consumer story as a whole, that fundamental story, is collapsing. And as it collapses, the institutions of that story are falling apart. Most fundamentally, what I call consumer democracy, the idea that people's only agency is to choose between a fixed set of options every few years, and where we're encouraged to make that choice on the basis of our individual self-interest. That idea is not commensurate, can never be commensurate with the scale of the challenges we face. You can't solve loneliness and mental ill health from within a story that says we're independent, isolated individuals. You can't solve inequality from within a story that says that competition is the dynamic that will fix everything. And you can't solve climate and ecological crisis from within a story that says we're separate from nature and that happiness at an individual level and success at a societal level is all about material standards of living. You can't solve the crises from within the story because the story created the crisis as well as the institutions. As that story falls apart, as we no longer believe in it, as we can no longer trust its outputs, the subject story is back. This is how I understand the rise of the strongman leader in our times. And in the US, it's a fusion of subject and consumer. The CEO monarchy is the sort of idea of a man called Curtis Yarvin who sits behind Donald Trump. But what my work is about is an argument that actually there is a whole other possibility and a whole other reality emerging, rooted in what I call the citizen story, which is actually a much older, much deeper, much truer idea of humanity. The citizen story says the right thing to do isn't just to keep your head down and do as you're told, nor is it to pursue self-interest. The right thing to do is to get involved, to contribute your ideas and energy and resources to the pursuit of the best outcomes, and critically to reimagine and reinvent our institutions to tap into that collective energy, wisdom, and resource. In the citizen story, we're interdependent. We do stuff together with and through organizations. We participate and create as our most fundamental activities, and organizations and leaders facilitate that. I want to offer you another lens to understand what I mean by this, about this moment in time, how I understand it. This I'm not going to go into loads of detail on, but you can check it out. It's called the two loops theory of change, first proposed by the Buchanan Institute. And the fundamental thing to understand here is this is an argument about how change this fundamental, change the kind we're living through works. Their argument is that over time, there are times when a dominant system is in decline, but it is still the dominant system. But everyone knows it's in decline and failing, but we kind of have to work from within it. At the same time, there is an emergent system that is taking shape even as the dominant system is declining, but it's very hard to see. And all of the attention of the dominant system is paid to its dynamics and its institutions. Our media radar is so tuned to Washington and Westminster and Berlin, and not to the communities and the places in the world where actually a different idea of democracy, a different idea of how we could be and work is already taking shape. And this is what I try and do. This is the work I exist in the world to do, is to tell the stories of that emergent system of democracy. As well as my book, I co-host a podcast called How to Save Democracy with a Tunisian woman called Omazine Khalifa. She was an activist in the Arab Spring and then became a politician in Tunisia. We make an interesting team. But the stories we're telling are of places around the world where that idea of possibility that's expressed by America in one room is reality. We've told the story of the Irish Citizens' Assembly, a standing body made up of 99 randomly selected Irish citizens on a rolling term who are brought together when there is a major issue for the country to decide on to put forward a recommendation. You may have heard of the referendum in 2018 by which the Irish people voted 66% to legalize access to abortion in a very traditionally conservative country, in a context where most of the referenda of our time probably haven't gone in that kind of direction and have divided people rather than bringing them together. That recommendation to legalize access to abortion up to 12 weeks was formed by the Citizens' Assembly, by 99 randomly selected people brought together for 5 weekends over 5 months to deliberate and make that recommendation. That is a standing structure in Irish democracy. We tell the story of Taiwan, where the Taiwanese COVID response is still a story that I can't believe I'm one of the only people telling. You're lucky enough to have Audrey Tang on one of these stages tomorrow morning. Do go to that session. What they did in Taiwan was they crowdsourced their national response with the 3 design principles: fast, fun, and fair. My favorite story within the story is they set up a phone line where anyone could ring in with ideas for how the country's response could be better. And a little boy rang up and said, the boys in my class don't want to wear their face masks because they're pink and they think they're girly. So you should do something to make pink face masks cool, and I think you should work with the baseball team. 3 days later, they had half the Taiwanese baseball team, the little boy and the president, on the national televised press conference in their pink face masks. It is not rocket science, my friends. These stories, I could go on and on. There is a different way of doing democracy that is out there, that is possible, that is complementary. We're hoping to host some of Zoran Mamdani's team very soon. One of the first announcements he has made is that he's creating an Office of Mass Engagement as part of his government of New York City. It is happening. It is possible. And if we understand the core dynamic that is driving the decline and could be reversed to drive the emergence, it's something we all have a role to play in. This is the dynamic. To give no trust is to get no trust. Trust is reciprocal. And what we are caught in at the moment is another feedback loop. People don't trust institutions, but institutions don't trust people. And when we go round and round that is why we are where we are. The flip of this has to be that institutions start to trust people. And that is what processes like American One Room, like the Taiwanese crowdsourcing their COVID response, like the Irish running a standing citizens' assembly, and are examples of that. When institutions start to trust people, people start to trust institutions back because they feel closer, because they feel respected, because they are respected and they're involved. And this is something that we can all practice in our organizations, in our day-to-day lives. The challenge, the most deep challenge that I'm offering you is that this is a moment when it's very difficult to have faith in humanity. It's very difficult to have faith in human nature. But to fail to do so is to be part of that dynamic, of the other dynamic. To fail to invest trust in our fellow people is to encourage them to fail to trust us, is to get caught in that loop. The responsibility on all of us in our day-to-day lives is to do this. In our organizations, this is a conference made up of people with serious agency in their organizations. There's a whole chapter of my book on citizen business, ideas for how you can involve people in purposeful work, not just sell to them as consumers, not be part of that story. What I want to leave you with is not just an encouragement to be part of that, reversing that dynamic, but also an encouragement to see yourself as a citizen, not just as a consumer. To understand that when you're surrounded on a day-to-day basis by messages that tell you you're a consumer, you're being encouraged to be a smaller version of yourself. When we all take ownership of the story that we're surrounded by, when we all take ownership of the story we tell, what we pay attention to grows. And we do build a different future. This, my friends, this future of democracy is happening, it's possible, and we all need to be part of it. Thank you very much.